but it's the big thick ones. They're like about that diameter, or as big as my pinky. Those are the ones that you guys can cut, because those have already done their time. See, this guy's combing out pretty good. And when you go to comb it out, depending on the pot that you're going to use, and again, if anybody has a question, just yell it out loud. See, we're getting to some of the thicker ones here in the middle. And when you decide what size of pot that you want to put it in, you know, preferably as starter bonsais, you want to go in something a little deeper, just to make it a little easier on you, especially if it's your first time, because then you don't have to do too much shaving. You can part that right down the middle, and it fits perfectly, so you don't have to do any kind of shaving. But if I were to put it in this, then definitely what I would do is I would take it under the water, and I would do a root wash, even though this is coming out pretty good. But you can always measure it and go, yeah, that's flush. But some people like it when it's kind of raised up in a mound like that. That just kind of depends on whether or not you want to do it that way. But see right there. See that big guy right there? Yeah. Almost has the appearance of a grow container taproot. That one you can cut. That one you can cut right there, because you still have probably about 97% of all your fine feeder roots still looking good color. If they're black on the bottom, and when you slide your hand down them, and the casing comes off, then those are the roots you definitely want to chop, because those are dead. Those are going to do nothing except for eventually decompose, naturally feed it, but you're going to be controlling the food as you do that. Like that guy right there. And little guys like this are always sweet. There's a company out there, I was telling these two earlier, I originally was going to have everybody do their own, like a super big hands-on kind of gig. But because of the weather this year, nothing could ship. Nothing could ship. It's when you're in the nursery business, it all comes down to weather. You know that. But like this guy, and I'm going to make him sturdy again. Again, we're going to go off center with him, because that's how I like to do it. But again, you guys can do it in the middle, off to the side. And you can do a lot of stuff over the top of it to help retain moisture. And again, this one's pretty easy. We're going from basically easy, medium, and then we're going to do the big guy.
If you put moss on top of the soil, is that a bad idea, since root rot seems to be a problem with bonsai trees?
No. There's a company you guys may want to write down. They are the top of the line bonsai supply company by the name of Joshua Roth. There's a particular spore called the Kyoto Spore, which you can just sprinkle it right over the top, and then you get that nice moss. Like when we're all walking through the greenhouse and we see that moss growing, in between the flagstone and rock. Same thing. Joshua Roth. Yeah. Kind of like David Lee. Seeing this guy right here, what I'm going to do with him, so I'm just going to do just a little bit of shredded bark over the top of it, because it gives good color, and it also helps to retain moisture. And then you could also, I like to add we were talking about this earlier as well. I like to use what I call living rock. So when you're done with your bonsai, and you have your friends come over, and they're looking at your collection, but what they're not seeing is all this live rock that has all the petrified ferns in it. So it adds just a little bit of texture to it. And now let me get rid of these guys here. Now we're gonna do some shaping of that guy.
If you're going to do moss, do you put things like the pond shavings on top, or do you just leave it as the soil and then sprinkle on the spores?
Just leave the dirt and just sprinkle the spores. And while you're doing that, most people don't, but if you have like a little terrarium or even like a little greenhouse, if you can keep your soil temperature above between 75 and like 85 degrees, those spores are going to germinate a lot quicker for you, a lot quicker. And you have to keep those spores out of the sun, by the way.
So when you go to trim your tree after you've put those spores on, do you just re-spore it when you plant it, or will they be able to hold on to the?
Usually what you could do is get a good blade, and it'll just lift right up. It'll just lift right up, because the root system on moss is more of like an arrow root, even though it is rooting in about the top, like maybe 1/8 inch of the soil, but it stops. It stops right there. It won't grow all the way down and totally encompass your whole growing medium, but yeah. You have to keep those spores out of the sun now. Kind of like your Japanese maples. Japanese maples do great here. You just can't give them any sun. But that's the same with your spores, because if you think about where those spores are naturalized to, it's underneath trees in a jungle. That ain't gonna happen here, unless you're like up in Cedar Crest. And then even in Cedar Crest, you can get the cold hardy moss. But with that, because it's almost like an epiphyte, almost kind of like an orchid kind of thing, it's going to grow onto any kind of dead material. So it's not going to be that easy for you to get up. Okay. But it's called Kyoto spores.
What kind of plant is that one you're working on?
This is a holly. Yeah. And I'm just going to generally shape it. The way that I shape it is that, since I've been doing this for a little bit more than a couple days, I look at every plant. When you guys come and go, hey, I've got, can you recommend something for this area? Can we recommend something for that area? I'll go yes, no, maybe. But how I look at how things are pruned and how they're going to be planted, I look at them at 5 to 7 years in the future. The reason why I'm gonna take these two off right here is so I can even out your canopy. And this is not classified as topping, by the way. Topping is not good for trees unless it's a shrub or some other type of evergreen. I pruned it up that way because I like that good clean multi-trunk. Gonna still even out this canopy a little bit with some of these larger ones. And the fertilizer that you would use for any of these evergreens, there's always exceptions, such as houseplants and that kind of thing. But anything that's an evergreen, like your hollies, your boxwoods, your yews, your osmanthus, any of those, your euonymus. When you fertilize your bonsais, because we're in New Mexico and we have very alkaline water, you'll want to keep it on a good soil acidifier plus iron diet. So when you go to fertilize your plants, just put 2 tablespoons a gallon of this in your fertilization mixture, and use that. That way, because you're obviously going to be watering it with tap water. Tap water is very alkaline. In certain areas of Albuquerque, it actually tests at over 8.5, which is extraordinarily very high. Very high. When it's that high, you can take a shot glass and let all of it evaporate, and all you're going to do is see just a whole bunch of calcium and lime buildup, which is what you don't want around the root system of any of your plants. When you do fertilize on a regular basis, since we're on that gig as well, when you do fertilize on a regular basis, you do get mineral buildup because that's how Mother Nature works. You get the mineral buildup that can actually start to coat some of the fine feeder roots with that mineral buildup, causing your fine feeder roots to only absorb about maybe I'm being generous, about 30% of your fertilizer. But if you use Sledgehammer, and you can use this on any of your indoor houseplants, by the way, guys. What this is it's made out of saponin. It's organic. It comes from the yucca. What it does is you use this every other fertilization to flush out all of the mineral buildup from your fertilization schedule. So the next time I'm sorry?
How often do you fertilize?
It depends on what you have. Just like a standard and evergreen, like any of these guys, I'd say you could probably get by with a full dosage depending on what you're using. Usually it's probably about 2 tablespoons per gallon. I'd say probably about once a month. But if you're doing like bogeys, if you're doing anything flowering, then you would use something with a higher middle number, such as like a BR61, or there's another product that I don't have now, but it is actually en route, called Grow Big by Fox Farm. I believe it's a 684. The middle number is perfect for normal flowering plants, even though your bogeys are different. That's why when you get to know exactly what your plant wants by choosing the plant that you want, then when you finally get to know it, you'll know that your bougainvilleas don't like a higher middle number, even though that's normally your bloom formula is, like your BR61, it's like a 10-58-4 or something like that, but it's got a higher middle number. But your bogeys prefer a very high first number, a very high nitrogen. All of your evergreens require a high sulfur diet, which is what that's going to do for you. And if you've been fertilizing any of your houseplants, bonsais, whatever, if you've been fertilizing, for several years and haven't flushed it, if you go to flush your plant, you're going to see your plant perk up in less than a week. And also be careful with water softeners. A lot of people use water softeners. You don't water your plants with salt. Up in the heights, especially a lot of the areas around Wantubo and Tramway, they use a lot of sodium chloride water softeners. Whereas in Rio Rancho, they'll use a lot of the potassium chloride water softeners, which over a period of time you're going to see it damage the plant because you're watering it with a salt, which is what you don't want to do.
So you're gonna have to fertilize these more often because you just don't have as many roots and a root base. Like you do outside.
In theory, right now, because it's brand new, because they're brand new, all that I would use right now for a month is use this every time you water for a month. That way, it's got N-butyric acid in it. It helps prevent any kind of transplant shock. But with this guy, it should be good because we didn't really shave anything off there. This guy, when we do this guy, that definitely. What I would do with something this size, when we do this one, is what I like to do is I like to take it out, and then when I start knocking off the roots, I'll stick the whole thing in a bucket with that in it, with the recommended dosage on the size of the bucket that you have, and soak it for about 20 minutes. So you can get all that N-butyric acid into the fine feeder roots and into the main root flare before you actually start to plant it. Then that way, after you're done, you don't have to mix it up in a water jug and do it again. But we're not going to do that with this one today. But yeah, that one will be pretty cool, and eventually, you can't really tell, but it's getting ready to pop blooms out of the middle junctures right here. This whole cap is going to be all bright yellow flowers. All bright yellow flowers and all bright yellow flowers. Because the way that I trimmed it, the flowers are going to focus in the middle of each of these 4 branches right on top, which as it gets older, which is the look that you're going to want to get. That's why you prune everything on how you want it shaped and how you want it to grow. Like this guy planted sideways. This guy planted it like that, almost at a 45-degree angle. Because eventually, and it's going to be fun. I don't know if everybody can see it, but eventually, this whole thing is it's still going to work its way down, but eventually it's going to start to curve back up straight, like that. And I like to add stuff like that too. Okay, now we're going to go to the big guy. This one's going to be a little easier because we're going to see how big the root systems are down here, which is pretty substantial. You can already see that big one right there. That's when you go straight for broke. But we're gonna measure it to about right there. You know, when you go like that, when you're digging a hole with your shovel, kind of the same thing. So about that deep. Then I always go right, not to the top of the soil line right there, but where that first trunk comes out. So about right there. And then just go for broke. See, and that one came out real nice. Nice, good, clean. There's still some thicker ones in here. I don't know if everybody can see those, but there's some thicker ones in here that I'm going to go ahead and comb out of there with my fingers because it's a pretty woody soil. And once you get to know your growers, you'll know which growers have a good, nice, loose root system like that, or there's other growers that they're so tight that I would still be cutting with this because the root system is still so, pretty substantial. But this guy's actually coming out pretty good. And I'm going to show you something kind of funny right here too, guys, that you do kind of run into sometimes. That's
Now you do.
some growers do that. Some growers do that. Once you actually get into, like Heinz, Monrovia, a lot of those guys, especially on certain hollies that I have over there, they plant 2 plants in there to make it look fuller. To make it look fuller for retail. So when you get in, see, that's going to be just a wicked bonsai in itself.
Yeah.
That's one of the bonuses, and that I won't have anything to do with. Something I would consider doing, but I don't have anything here, and I don't want to run out on you. But I'll show you something real cool that you guys can do. Just of course hypothetically. You can get, I think that'll work. Actually, that one will do pretty good right here. What some people do, because you can plant this guy about right there, so you can see that whole root structure here. And of course, I'm going, the conventionalist method. You can do something called root over rock. You could do something like that, to where if you just plant this above ground and that's all that you see, eventually this whole root system is going to grow over that rock and hold on to that rock. Which would be pretty sweet. But this one we're not going to do it to, because that's going to be pretty sweet just by itself. See, and that one's going to be, that's going to be cool too. It's kind of cool when one turns into 2. But yeah, there's a holly back over here in the corner called Boy Girl. Boy Girl. I think another name for it, I think it's called Berry Magic. The one where there's a boy and a girl in the same pot, so you can get all the goodies with it. See, this one. I'll go back on that side. That one's got such a cool little root system that you may want to maybe go up a little bit on that one in kind of like a wider pot, which is I think what we'll do, just so you can see this gnarly root system. That's how I want to plant it, is right like that. So you have plenty of room underneath there for your fine feeder roots. And again, it was kind of a bonus that we didn't have to shave this one. But that one will look pretty gnarly. And of course, we're still going to clean up the base of it. See, and this one will be perfect to do.
How do you pick the pot size? Like, you want a pot that all the roots will fill it up, or you want to get a pot that's bigger than it? Like, that one pretty much fills it up already.
Yeah, that one actually worked out pretty well. Once you get in and actually see how much of a root system that you're going to have to work with, and depending on your skill set, you know, because you can plant this, you know, in something that shallow, but you're also increasing your work, your trimming just exponentially, you know. So, you know, just to start off with, I'd probably go with like a medium, maybe even a large, you know, like this guy, so you can keep your shaving to a minimum until you start to get the hang of it a little bit more. And when you pack it, I'd like to see you pack the edges down really good. Don't get in with something and start, you know, packing it away, you know, to give it more, to make it sturdy. If you need to make it sturdy, then just go ahead and do the wiring underneath it, because the harder you do this around the middle where those fine feeder roots are, you get something very common in the construction industry called root compaction. That's dangerous. You want it to be comfortable where it is. And I'm sorry guys, I decided that I was going to go ahead and take off these feeder roots that are more arrow rooted right now.
Is that a holly?
This is a camellia.
So if you want to plant more than one bonsai in one bonsai pot, do you just have to make sure they both like the same fertilizer and the same amount of water? Is that all you need to worry about?
And room.